Welcome to Writing Through It. I'm Eric, and today I want to talk to you about a big milestone in my novel, and that is hitting 95,000 words. Am I done? No. I have a lot left to do? Maybe, but that's part of what I want to talk about. But really what this is going to be about is reflecting on some of the surprises, the expectations that I had that did come through, and what I hope to have happen as I bring this project to a close. So one thing that surprised me about this process, and I've only written one novel before, and I think that was around 95,000 words at its completion, but that might have been trimmed back later. Anyway, this is not surprising, but it is surprising, and that is that the story evolves over time. No matter what I've done, whether it's writing a screenplay, writing a novel, or making a movie, documentary, or fiction, there is this reality that you set out to make this one story, you write and film this one story, and then you end up releasing this version of the story. There's 3 versions of the story in every story. And so now I'm kind of at that second phase where I had a plan of what this story was all going to be about, and I'm still on that path, but it develops. I mean, you're talking 200, 300 pages of content. Things are going to evolve and change, and part of the writer's ability to ride that chaos is pretty vital. So I've been learning in myself that though it's difficult, that you get these problems and you're trying to solve them, you realize that you do have to keep going. And that's what I found myself doing. I found myself continuing to go when I was stuck in a chapter. So I still have chapters that are very short that I think need to be built out or absorbed into a different chapter, either the one before or after. I'm not going to force something to be longer than it needs to be, but sometimes maybe the idea is better fit in another chapter versus a standalone. The other thing with that I've been realizing is how each chapter is separated is really a self-contained story. And so instead of having this long narrative, I'm starting to think more about each chapter having an arc. And it's not something I didn't know. I think it's something that naturally you're going to do because there's a natural break point in a chapter, and that is rising action, falling action, maybe a little cliffhanger to get you to want to go to the next chapter. I think that's intuitive. It's natural if you've practiced enough. But now I'm beginning to edit some of my earlier chapters with that lens. And that's been really helpful because I see that I am doing it. And then as you review, you're realizing your skills are developing. So that gives you hope to carry you forward. I think the other part of that is that pacing is one of those issues that comes up. And I don't have a lot of focus on that right now because I realize I'm getting the story out. And what I've been doing recently is meeting with a friend from my Army days, a really good friend, a creative compatriot, and reading it to him. Literally sitting on a Zoom call and reading him the chapter and getting his thoughts on it, because as I read it, 2 things happen. One, he hears it, he doesn't know the story, and he's able to say what's moving and what's not moving for him, what he wants more of, what he wants less of. And sometimes maybe it's just great. But then for me, I'm hearing things he's not. So I read chapter 2 and ended up taking out about 400 words from that chapter because I recognized there was some repeating things that didn't need to be in there. I don't want redundancy, so I trimmed some back. That influences pacing. Redundancy detracts from pacing. And so I realized chapter 2 is going to be more of a lore dump in some ways. I'm going to drive you into Bram's world, and he's isolated and alone. And it's hard to write that story, but I put in moments to keep the pacing going to let the world tell you the lore. And so am I perfect at it? No. But I'm recognizing that in the review process, how I can do it and how I can better understand it by letting other people come in selectively and tell me. And that's been really beneficial. Another thing I like to pause in celebration is both the emotional highs and the lows of writing a novel and getting to word count of 95,000 and beyond. They both exist, and they're both part of the process because I don't know this for a fact, but I assume that every successful author has both that euphoric high and that crushing defeat of the lows of not being able to figure out where you're going with this plot detail, this character development, or whatever the issue is. And I've lived for those highs, but I've realized that you can't. That's not sustainable. But what you do, and what I've done, is get really excited when they show up and then be really okay when they don't. And then when I have the lows of no one's going to read this, this is just awful, it's so unoriginal, or whatever negative story I'm telling myself, I give that space too. I don't like it. I'd rather be happy, but it's pointless for me to block it because in my life, whether it's writing a novel or working through mental health, I have really benefited from the avoidance of suppressing those feelings to portray an image that I'm super okay and just rock steady. Silence killed me. That's what really almost took my life, was confusion and silence. Now, this doesn't mean I share every bit of confusion and sadness with the world around me. Sometimes I do lean on my wife or my ally from the army or a friend, and I do create things like the writers group and in containers where I can put positive and negative stuff, but just continue the open dialogue through the process, because the more I isolate and don't share that stuff, the more difficult it gets to work through it and to have that momentum surge forward even when it's really slow. In my novel, Bram Drags a Cart, and there is a lot of elements in that idea of it's going to make it real difficult to drag yourself through these lands. It's already hard enough without burdens, but when you give yourself one, it's even harder to make progress. And so the way we do that, the way I do it, is through communication. Expression kills depression. That is one of the antidotes that I've found in my life, is that if I'm expressing on the page, I'm able to handle life and the mental struggles that I do still struggle with and I work towards. If I express myself to a friend in an empowered way, not just boo-hoo, pity me, I'm sad, but just be real, but also talk about what I'm going to do and that I'm not beating myself up or I'm not a victim, I'm just struggling right now. In those back and forths, I get better because I'm talking through it with somebody. Sometimes I can do that by myself. The point is, make space for it. Don't try to shame yourself because you have the feeling. Let it have a seat next to you at the table. Let it be there for a little bit, but then keep going. Even if that means like doing laundry, folding laundry, doing a chore, doing something productive throughout the day, whether it's writing or not, allows you to keep writing, has allowed me to keep writing and get to this point of success, because success is determined by me and by you. It doesn't mean that the outside metrics determine it for you. You decide what is success. And for me, continuing to connect and express myself creatively is success, including the highs and the lows. Another thing that's funny is when I have this story written, at 95,000 words, I talk to my wife about it or different people, and I realize one of the topics that comes up is, as I'm sharing different aspects, I realize I unconsciously put certain things into the story. And that has been wonderful because it's changed my relationship with it to a degree. And I didn't even know I was doing it. But then I get excited when I see that. But I wouldn't have necessarily known it until I talked to this person about it. And when I realize that, I can go back and make sure I lean into that. So it's been really fun to see how this body of work has allowed me to view how much I didn't know I was putting into it. That made it more full for me as an experience, and hopefully for the reader as well. So the story's become much more personal, and I can see people from my life in it, kind of sprinkled in there. Certainly I put myself into Bram, and I've put some of the other parts of myself into some of the other characters that aren't necessarily as heroic, but people from my life in very broad characters of elements of who they are or how they acted at a certain part in my life. It's certainly not to villainize anyone, but it is to take those traits of villainy within all of us, those petty tyrants, and blow them up into bigger tyrants and really lean into the negative of that quality that they, maybe were because of traumas, maybe because of misunderstandings and insecurity that made their presentation less than desirable. I can put those in characters and work through it, which also helps me understand them better, because as I write this character, I am trying to think from their perspective. And there's that concept of approach everyone with compassion first so you can understand where they're coming from. It doesn't mean they're right, but at least you understand them. And it's really helped me work through some things of my own that I, have worked through in the past, but now I can more flesh it out and better understand it. And as I do it, I have less, I don't want to say anger towards people, but I don't think about them as much. And I think that's the point, is as you forgive, as you work through things, you don't necessarily think positively of them. You just don't think about them. They don't come into your mind that often unless something in conversation makes you be like, oh yeah. And then when you share about the situation, it doesn't have the intensity because you're sharing from a scar, not a wound. And that has been very, very impactful during my writing process. And that wasn't something I set out to do, but it is happening to me. And that's really exciting. Another thing is that consistency that I talked about before. A lot of people have that, the 21 days to develop a habit, or maybe longer, maybe shorter, or I don't know. But what I find is that when you make time for something, it tends to evolve and not take up more time in a negative way, but it becomes a priority. And the things we prioritize, we make progress on. That's not a mystery. If If you prioritize exercise, you work out more often. If you prioritize creativity, you're going to be more creative more often. Whatever it is, it's discipline. And I do understand the word discipline, but I like consistency better, because discipline sometimes feels like I'm forcing myself to do something, and I don't want to force myself to do something. I want to see the value in why I'm doing something. And that breeds consistency. I'm looking for ways to carve out time because I said this is important to me, and now I'm going to show myself if I mean it, or if I just thought it would be cool to be consistent, or this idea of getting better at this one thing would be great. And if the answer is no, then I fall off consistency. There's no amount of discipline that can make that a positive experience for me. Maybe it wasn't negative, but I'm like, okay, well, whatever. And discipline isn't a shameful thing, but sometimes I feel shame around it because as soon as I fail, I didn't have discipline. But that negates the inner issue that was causing me to fall off this thing. So consistency is something I chase and strive for. And when I miss it, I feel something is off. And then I can ask myself why I didn't. And sometimes it's just legitimate reasons. This novel, I've been incredibly consistent, but I've taken time off. I'm going to take time off in the future here because we're going on vacation. I don't plan on writing on it, but that's a choice. It's not a lack of discipline or focus or dedication. It's a conscious choice. And the more consciousness we have and the more awareness we have of why, the more choice we have and the better choices we can make. So consistency is me writing in the morning, first thing I get up, and getting some kind of writing done before I go to bed. That last part of the day is a bonus. It is not a requirement. And sometimes family is going to require more time in the evenings. Usually I get my kids to bed and then I write, but sometimes maybe my wife had a really tough day at work and I'm going to support her. And so that support could be 10 minutes. It could be 2-3 hours. It depends. And if it gets too late, I'm still going to try to get a little something written just to maintain that bookend of my day. I love starting with writing, ending with writing or reading. But if I don't get that last one, then, what are you going to do? And on the weekends, I don't necessarily get that first one. So I try and get that last one because I can stay up a little bit later. So I'm trying to make sure I'm touching writing every day. That's my consistency. The problem is, and this is really honest, the more consistent I get, the more protective I get. That becomes a problem because now my responsibilities, if I wasn't expecting it and I'm writing, here comes someone who needs something from me and then I get angry because I want to prioritize this writing. I want to get this line out. I want to finish this. I want to flow. And you just took me out of that. I can become angry because my boundary is crossed and my expectation of just being left alone to write has been crossed and not respected. It was unspoken, and it's not even realistic because life keeps going whether I'm writing a novel or not. So I have to be aware that protecting my time is good, but there comes a time where I need to be flexible because like this one day I wrote for 2 hours, got interrupted and I was like, and then I got back to it 10 minutes later, I got interrupted again, and it just kept going and I was like, screw this, like I'm done, But the reality is, I wrote for 2 hours before I got interrupted, and that's pretty productive. I was sometimes I'm writing for 3-4 hours and I get interrupted, and that's fine. Like I should be okay with that because I don't have a deadline right now. I don't actually have a body of work where I'm the sole wage earner based on my writing for our family, so I need to protect it. This is still a hobby and it's good for me. And I think we have to realize, what is this thing for us? And if it's not, required for the health and wellness of the family financially and emotionally, it becomes more of a hobby, and you should protect the time, but not at the cost of being angry with your family. And so I have learned that lesson as well. I just want to say that because not all the lessons I've learned are feel good, like I'm awesome. Sometimes it's me being immature, and I have to deal with those and mature that part of my life. And I can only do it if I'm aware. But staying in touch with creativity and physicality, exercising, and my mind and my body are really vital to helping me do that and work through the times that I fail to do it. The last thing I'll say about the progress so far is 95,000 words, not the end of my book. I don't know when the end will come. I know what it will be, but I don't at the same time. I have little images of my mind of beats that I want to hit. And my fear is I don't know if I'm going to hit them, and I don't know if it's going to hit as hard as, I don't really know what part of the novel it was, the 3/4 mark maybe. That was like this big moment, and I don't have to match it, but I'm afraid that it's not going to be as much of a payoff as that moment was. And I think the fear comes into taking that momentum and building it and carrying it through and making everything feel impactful and not forced. That's probably the bigger feeling, is I don't want to start feeling like rushed and to force it because I'm afraid of a 300-page novel or beyond, because I'm not a known name. I don't have a body of work for you to say, I could do 350 pages with Eric. Yeah, I like his writing. Like, you don't know that. But if I had a 100-page book, maybe the same problem would be like, I don't want to read a novella. But a 300-page novel, maybe you'd give me a shot. And so I'm playing that game, but also not being slave to it, because I know that's not valid either. But it's a fear. I want to make everything impactful where you're on this ride with me, and I don't have the details, and I'm being patient, and I'm going back because as I built the main storyline, these other offshoots kind of happen naturally, because you get to a certain point in the story and now you have to go back and take the antagonist path and see, like, what are they doing during all of this, because it's not just one storyline. It's not a heavy POV story, but there are a couple different shifts that I'm putting into it, and that's something they don't advise. They don't advise for a first-time author, but for my story, it needs it. I'm just being very cautious, and I want to balance it well, but I also don't want to forget and be like, oh shoot, now randomly this guy's over here and he was over here, and how do I need to explain how he got there, and things like that. So there's just that balance of all these things and elements coming together that I'm juggling, and mistakes are made and fixed, and forget moments and exciting moments. All of them are weaving together to create Where Magic Slept, and I'm getting there. And I'm excited. Next milestone is going to be hit probably, maybe even tomorrow, 100,000 words. I'm shooting for that. I'm at like actually 96,000, 97,000. So I should hit 100,000 tomorrow before my vacation. And then we'll see where it goes. And then after I get done with the novel, it's into edits. And that's a whole different scary process that I'll share with you. I've done a little bit of it, but it's not going to be like to the level of here's my complete body of work. Now what are we doing? And then it's publishing, it's selling, it's all of those things, and trying to get agents and whatever. I'm learning all these things, and I've gotten 50 rejection letters in the past from my other novel, and I think that's good. I don't think that book was ready to be made, and maybe I'll get back to it someday and take my fresh eyes and see if it's still a story that I want to save and release to you guys in some way if I edit it, but we'll see how it goes. I'm taking it and playing it by ear and enjoying the process, because I believe falling in love with the process is one of the most important things you can do, because there's no guarantee that anything will come of what we put ourselves into. And as painful as that is, it's real. And if I accept it, I can love the process, and anything that comes after that is just a symptom of consistency and dedication to the love of the process. So hope you're finding success in your creative endeavors. If you need help in creative resiliency, please keep with this channel, because I do want to release a lot more ideas and things that have helped me through creative resiliency. Have some classes, get together and talk about this, because whether you're a professional or you just want to express something and connect to your creativity because you think you're not, I'm telling you, you are, and it's important, and I want to help you. So thanks for checking out the video. Hope to see you in the next one, and until then, journey well, my friends.